Hello, my name is Nalani Brown. I'm the philanthropy coordinator at Frank Toby Jones, and we are going to finish Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent. Chapter 50. Sir H. Vane Tempest noticed the peculiar waxiness of the magnolias, grandifloras he'd planted along his southern drive. The long shadow of late afternoon heightened the colors and the sense of melancholy at the day's passing. A troop of gardeners worked behind the house. Usually, the garden delighted him. Vane Tempest was not a man to delight in people, since he viewed all relationships as a power struggle, a struggle he must win in order to feel important. He saw people in terms of a vertical scale. Perhaps the Windsor family ranked above him, certain Rothschilds and von Thysens, but he believed he sat very near the pinnacle. Usually, that fact thrilled him. Since reading Turek's transcription, he'd been unthrilled, indeed, deeply miserable. "The days are drained into time's cup, and I've drunk it dry," he whispered to himself, turning on his heel to go inside. He stopped, turned around, and looked at the gardens. He noticed Sarah walking among the workers. Her beauty soared beyond explanation. Like the beauty of creamy peonies. It just was. He turned once more and walked into the house. He strolled down the long parquet floor hallway, barely noticing the Monet. He strode into Sarah's room, opened her closet, clicked on the lights, and closed the door behind him. Row upon row of cashmere sweaters and plastic see-through boxes attested to her acquisitiveness, as well as to her insight into the fact that she was valuable only as long as she was beautiful. He headed for the long rows of canvas garment bags. He unzipped them one by one. Sumptuous evening gowns of emerald, sapphire, ruby, silver, white, and gold spilled over the sides of the open bags. He could picture his wife in each of these extravagantly expensive confections. He reached into the bottom of each garment bag, swished around with his hand, then moved to the next one. The last bag, tucked in the cedar-lined closet, swayed lightly. He opened it. The zipper clicked as the tab moved down. Her shimmering peach gown fluttered. He reached down. Nothing. The door opened. "H, what are you doing?" "Where is it?" "What?" She noticed the shine on his brow, the gleam in his eye. "Your uniform." "What uniform?" "Don't play games with me. You dressed up and shot me. Archie doesn't have the guts." "I did no such thing." "Liar!" He lunged toward her, but the closet was huge. She slammed the door, locked it, and cut off the lights. She took her unregistered snub-nosed .38 out of the nightstand by her bed and threw it into her purse. Then she ran for hell. Chapter 51. Harry was just turning into her driveway when Sarah flew past her without waving, her car only a blur. She stopped at her mailbox, watching as Sarah turned into Blair's driveway a quarter-mile down the road. "I wonder," she said out loud, but then shook her head. "Nah." Sarah roared up to the house, parked her car next to the Porsche, and ran to the door. "Archie! Archie!" Archie, who'd just come back from dragging the U-Haul to Tally's, was surprised to see Sarah burst through the doorway. Even more surprised when she flung herself into his arms. "I think I'll go to my office." Blair, who'd been helping Archie, put his papers in a box and then walked upstairs. Sarah waited until she heard the door close. "He's going to kill me." "H?" "Archie, I've got to get out of here. You have to help me." "And why does he want to kill you?" "Because I tried to kill him." "What?" "It was me at Oak Ridge. You were right. I dressed as a soldier just as you said. Those damned old rifles. It's a wonder anybody hit the broadside of a barn during that war." Archie held her at arm's length. "Sarah, you really shot H. Vane?" "I'm only sorry that I missed killing him," she said. "He knows?" Archie was amazed. "He thinks he knows. I caught him in my closet going through my garment bags, looking for the uniform. Damn his eyes. Well, he won't find it. I'm not stupid. I burned the thing." So he has no proof. No, but what does that matter? He's in a rage. He'll kill me if he finds me, and he's so rich he'll get off. People like him always do. Why did you want to kill him? Archie coolly asked. Because I couldn't stand his fat body one more minute. Because I hate him. I hate the sight of him. You've never been a servant, Archie. You wouldn't understand. Well, you are a very well-paid one. Sensing his withdrawal, she said, I couldn't tell you. You would have tried to stop me. As long as he's alive, I can't be with you. And why should I go to the poorhouse? I've worked for that money. If he caught us together, my divorce would be an open and shut case. Shut the door. Bang. I see. Archie, you have to help me. She threw her arms around him. And where is he now? Locked in my closet. He'll eventually break down the door. His shoulder still hurts, but he's strong. You've got to hide me until I can figure something out. Jesus, Sarah. Didn't your mother tell you, look before you leap? If I'd done that, I'd never have fallen in love with you. I wish I'd believed that, he sighed. Beautiful women acquired men like dogs acquired fleas. All they had to do was walk through a room. Did you shoot Tommy? Tell me the truth this time. No, I loved Tommy once. She looked him square in the eye. He had magic. It didn't last long, but I was so miserable with H. Archie, can't you understand? He will kill me. All right. He stroked her hair. Try as he might, he couldn't stop loving her. He kissed her. Everything will be all right. He walked to the foot of the stairs. Blair? The door opened. Yes? I'm taking Sarah to the airport. Blair clomped halfway down the stairs. Everything okay? No, Sarah tearfully confessed. Blair, I can explain everything later. I just have to get out of here. Archie hustled into his Land Rover. Blair watched them start down the driveway. If he'd watched longer, he would have seen that Archie turned right out of his driveway, not left towards the airport. Pewter wedged herself underneath the camellia bush. She felt certain the blue jay would perch there since she'd squeezed herself in and was still. He wouldn't notice. Hunting was the best in the morning or late afternoon. No animal likes to go to bed on an empty stomach. She knew she could grab the blue jay. She'd even gone to the trouble of scattering about bread crusts, which she fished out of the garbage when Harry's back was turned. Pewter dreamed of ways to dispatch the bird, her favorite being a straight vertical leap, grasping the offender between her mighty paws, pulling him to the ground and staring him in the eye before breaking his neck. She who laughs last, laughs best, she told herself, revving her motor. She was ready. Pop! Mrs. Murphy, sitting on the hay wagon next to the barn, out of Pewter's way, heard it too. She looked toward Harry, who'd been inspired by the version of that new John Deere to get up on Johnny Pop and oversee the front acres. Harry rolled along, the small cedar attached to the back of the tractor. Pewter. Pewter wouldn't answer. Tucker, half asleep under the hay wagon, did. What? You hear that? Yes. That wasn't Johnny Pop. Mrs. Murphy was worried. The old tractor would pop, pop, pop along, but this pop was crisp. Pop. Pewter, get out from under the tree. We've got to get to Blair's. Pewter backed farther underneath the camellia bush. She'll do anything to spoil this. She doesn't think I can kill the blue jay. She thinks she's the great striped hunter. I'll show her, she thought to herself. Mrs. Murphy peeled off the hay wagon, covering 8 feet in the launch without even pushing hard. Tucker scrambled out. Pewter noticed the two racing across the field towards Blair's house. Torn, she grumbled, then slowly extracted herself from her perfect hiding place. Ha! Fatso! The blue jay, who'd been perched on the weather vane on top of the barn, screamed as he swooped over Pewter's head. She leapt up, twisting in the air, but missed. You are toast, she threatened, but hurried after Mrs. Murphy and Tucker. The J dive-bombed her part of the way, shrieking with delight. Mrs. Murphy didn't turn to look for Pewter or wait. Pewter switched on the afterburners. Her ears swept back, her whiskers flat against her face, her tail level to the ground. She veered right toward the creek, then dropped down onto the bank, ran alongside, found a shallow place, and ran through the water. No time to fool around and find another path. She reached Mrs. Murphy and Tucker as they crossed over by the old graveyard on the hill. The three animals flew down to Blair's house. Too late, Mrs. Murphy said. Blair sat in his car, the door open. Blood ran down his forehead, marring the leather seat. He was slumped over to the right, his long torso behind the gear shift, his head on the passenger seat. The motor was running. He appeared to have been shot. Tucker licked his hand, but Blair didn't move. Sarah Van Tempta's car was parked in front of the barn. Archie Ingram's car was gone. Mrs. Murphy jumped into his lap. Pewter followed by gingerly stepping onto the floor of the driver's side. The car was in neutral. Blair's left foot was on the clutch. His right had turned up sideways. Where's he hit? Tucker stood on his hind legs. I don't know. His legs are okay. Pewter sniffed for blood. What about his head? Mrs. Murphy put her nose into Blair's nose. She sniffed his lips, put a paw on his lower lip, and pulled it down. Gums are white. But is he hit in the head? There's a lot of blood, but I can only see the left side of his face. Put your nose to the seat. See if you smell blood or powder, Tucker advised. Murphy carefully laid the side of her face on the seat, her eye level with Blair's closed one. Blood's oozing on the seat. Must be the right side of his head, she said, cool in a crisis. Pewter, sit in his lap and lean over the horn. I'll keep licking him. Pewter, both paws on the horn, put her weight into it. The horn sounded. And who's going to hear it? Tucker sat down. Archie's not here. Mom's on her tractor. He's in a bad way. Murphy kept licking Blair's face. We've got to do something fast. Let's think. Pewter, over with Murphy now, put her paw on Blair's wrist. His pulse was erratic. We could run back to Harry, Pewter said. She's on the tractor. She can't hear us. She might not even notice us. We've got to convince her to come over here. Murphy checked the gear shift on the floor. Tucker, are you thinking what I'm thinking? It's his only chance, the dog solemnly said. I wish somebody would tell me, an upset gray kitty exploded. We're gonna drive this sucker, Murphy resolutely stated. You are out of your mind. Pewter, go home then, Murphy told her sharply. Tucker, give him a shove. Tucker nudged Blair with her front paws and her head. He slowly slumped over just a bit more. Pewter, are you in or out of this car? I'm in. What do you want me to do? We've got to get the car in first gear. His foot's on the clutch, Pewter said. Okay, Tucker, can you fit down there? Yes, I can. Sit on his foot while Pewter and I push the gear shift into first. Then slowly move his foot off the clutch and we'll steer. Won't work. We'll stall out, Tucker panted. The trick is, I have to get his foot off the clutch and mine on the gas pedal. Luckily, his foot isn't on the gas pedal. We have to get this right on the first try. Murphy crawled over into Blair's lap while Pewter sat in the passenger seat, patting his face with her paw. The idea was for Murphy to push the shift stick from the top while Pewter pulled from the bottom. Ready? Murphy tearlessly asked. Yes, the two replied. The cats moved the gear shift into first. That part was easy. The next part was hard because if they stalled out, they'd have to turn the key and feed gas at the same time. They didn't think they could do it. Tucker, it's better if we shoot ahead than stall out, Murphy advised. Pewter joined her in the driver's seat. She stood on her hind legs, staring out the window. Murphy sat in Blair's lap, her paws on the bottom of the steering wheel. God, I hope this car is as responsive as all those ads say it is. Murphy sent up a little prayer to the great cat in the sky for Blair. Okay, let's go. Tucker pushed off Blair's foot as she pushed down on the gas pedal with her right paw. The car lurched forward and sputtered. More gas. Tucker, both feet free now, pressed on the accelerator. The car smoothly accelerated at an amazing speed. "Keep on the road and not so much gas." "Help me," Murphy called out. Pewter, claws unleashed, sank them into the leather steering wheel. She struggled to keep the car on the gravel driveway. Even a small motion turned the wheels. Tucker let up a little. Pewter screamed. "I'm trying." Tucker took her full weight off the flat pedal. "We've got it now. We've got it." "What are we going to do when we get to the paved road?" Pewter shivered with fear. "Pray that no car is coming our way, because if we stop, we won't get started again." Pewter, eyes huge, chin quivering, steered for all she was worth. By God, she might be afraid, but she wasn't a coward. They reached the end of Blair's long driveway. A truck was past them on the right. With all their might, the two cats turned the wheel to the left. The car door swung wide open. "Not too much, not too much," Pewter directed. "More?" Tucker couldn't see a thing. This was truly an act of blind faith. "No, keep it right like it is, Tucker. You're doing great. Okay, here's our driveway. Another left. Not too much, it's curvy." Murphy kept her voice calm. "Slow, slow. Oh no, there's another car." Pewter's fur stood on end. "He sees us. He's not going to hit us without messing himself up." The car swerved around them, horn honking. "Asshole," Murphy spat. "Yeah, okay, now keep your eyes on the road, Pewts. We'll make it." The car dropped down a bit on the dirt road. The stones had moved to the sides, as they always do. It's a waste of money putting stone on a driveway, but who can afford macadam? "I see Mom." Pewter almost wept with relief. "Tucker, keep it steady. We have to roll past her line of vision." Okay, she sees us." Pewter hit the horn. Pewter laid on the horn for all she was worth. "Off?" "Yeah." Tucker lifted her weight off the gas pedal. The car shuddered to a stop. Harry stopped the tractor and hit the ground running. She tore over her newly seeded field. "Oh my God," was all she could say when she reached the stalled-out turbo. She put it in neutral, started it, then picked up and activated the car phone and dialed 911. "Crosette emergency." Diana Robb didn't get to finish her sentence. "Diana? Harry. Blair's in my driveway. He's been shot. There's blood everywhere. For God's sake, hurry." She dropped the phone. She was shaking so hard that Tucker, now on the ground, licked her hands. She then remembered to turn off the motor. She no longer needed the power for the telephone. Harry felt Blair's pulse, which was surprisingly strong. Fearful of moving him, she ran around to the passenger side of the car and opened the door. The two cats got out of the car and looked up at her blankly. Within minutes, they heard the siren. The rescue squad halted behind the Porsche. Diana reached Blair first. "Call the ER. Let's get him out of here." "Is he going to make it?" "I don't know." Diana held his head. "Help me lift him upright from the passenger side. We'll slide him out onto the driver's side." She turned to Harry. "How did he ever make it here?" "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me." The animals watched, tears in their eyes, their ears drooping, as Harry and Diana lifted out the injured man. Joe Ferram, Diana's assistant, rolled out the gurney from the back of the ambulance. The three humans gently placed Blair in the gurney. Joe took Blair's pulse as Diana, still stabilizing his head, examined the wound. "I can't find an entry point." She stared at the bloody right side of Blair's head. Blair moaned. "Dear God, what can I do to help him?" Harry, in tears, cried. "Take a couple of deep breaths. We'll get him to the ER as fast as we can. You wait for Rick to get here. I'll call him on the way to the hospital. Oh, Harry, don't touch the car, okay?" "Okay." Harry wiped her eyes. Joe had shut the ambulance doors and hopped into the driver's seat as Diana jumped in next to Blair, closing the doors behind her. They hit the siren and flew down the gravel road as Harry tried to collect herself. "Please let Blair live," Tucker whimpered. "I don't believe what I saw." Harry cried anew, reaching down to stroke her animals. "You guys are heroes." "We couldn't let him die. He has a fighting chance," Murphy solemnly said. Harry sat down in the grass and waited for Sheriff Shaw. Next chapter. A crowd of people kept vigil in the hospital hallway. Harry, Miranda, Big Mim, Little Mim, Herb Jones, Boom Boom, Susan, and Ned Market Shiflett, Jim Sanborn, and Dr. Larry Johnson. Finally, Larry's young partner, Hayden McIntyre, emerged from the operating room. Everyone stood up. He'll live. A collective sigh of relief passed through the group, and tears withheld from fear suddenly flowed in gratitude. Dr. Chan's closing him up now, but he'll definitely make it. Larry rushed down immediately once he heard the news. Hayden took him to look at the x-rays. There's swelling in the area of damage. The brain is fine. Luckily, the bullet didn't shatter his skull. It made a deep crease. Hayden pointed to the x-ray. Right here is where the bullet grazed, like a crease in a piece of paper that tears just a bit. Oh, thank God. Larry closed his eyes for a second. It's very hard to say what his prognosis is until the swelling goes down. He should be fine. He's young, strong, healthy, but this is the last place you want swelling. Time and rehab will tell. Later, Larry walked with Hayden to see Blair in post-op. Any ideas about what happened? He asked. Yes, given the position of the wound, I think he turned away from his attacker. He didn't anticipate being shot? Larry rubbed his forehead with the palm of his hand. No, he turned his back. Any other signs of struggle on the body? Larry gazed at the tall man, seeming asleep except for the tubes running into him. No, not a mark. Chapter 54. When Blair regained consciousness, Rick and Cynthia were waiting for him. Hayden gave them 5 minutes only because Blair's condition was still critical. Did you see who shot you? Rick quietly leaned over Blair's bed. Blair didn't answer because he could barely focus. He had the world's worst headache. Archie? Rick whispered to the wounded man. No, Blair whispered, and then lost consciousness again. Chapter 55. The sun shone over central Virginia. Each leaf, a bride in spring green, smiled at the radiant afternoon light. The trumpet vines opened their orange flowers. Bumblebees appeared in squadrons. Honeybees, decimated by fatal mite, buzzed but in reduced numbers. Harry, dazed that her friend had been shot, worked hard, but her mind kept returning to yesterday's sight of the cats driving the car with Tucker down in the well. She knew that any animal recognizes injury and pain in any other animal. What was remarkable was that they brought the bleeding man to her. They drove him right in front of her. Each time she envisioned Murphy and Pewter, both with their paws on the steering wheel, she'd get the shakes. Living close to nature, Harry was connected to reality. Harry was better connected to reality than many people. Now she had to face the depth of their ignorance. She had credited her animal friends with human traits. She'd insulted them by masking their true natures with human characteristics. She missed what was unique about each species. It was entirely possible that Mrs. Murphy and Pewter, along with Tucker, operated at another level of intelligence than she did. It was also possible that theirs was higher but not measurable by human standards. Harry was being humbled by life in its myriad form. Chapter 56. In the west, an inferno illuminated the sky, the spring sun setting in a scarlet blaze. The sky, as though put to the torch, exploded in scarlet and gold. Cynthia noticed the drama of it as she checked her service revolver. Rick, his mouth a straight line, carefully coasted down the road toward Tally Urquhart's hay barn, where Tommy Van Allen's plane was stowed. He'd stopped at Miss Tally's to inquire if she'd seen Archie. She said he was renting a room in her house while he fixed up an old farm worker's stone house down the farm road. When Cynthia inquired as to how they'd get along, Tally curtly replied, "I need somebody to fight with." Rick ordered her to stay in her house. She said she had seen Archie's white Land Rover go back there a while ago. She'd heard another car not 10 minutes ago, but she didn't go to the window in time to see it. However, she was sure it was another car going in and not one coming out. Rick was no sooner out of the front door than Tally phoned him. "Boss, should we wait for backup?" "No time." God, I hate these kinds of things. Like all police officers, Rick knew domestic violence to be the most irrational of situations. Armed robbery was easy compared to this. After speeding down the old farm road toward the hay barn, Rick cut the motor at a curve out of sight from the barn door. Both cops got out, drew their guns, and slowly walked toward the barn, which they could not yet see. Before they rounded the curve, they heard a curse, 2 shots, and a scream. They ran, but with practiced caution. As the 2 officers approached the barn doors, they saw Sir H. Vane Tempest bent over Archie Ingram. Sarah was clinging to her husband. "Freeze!" Rick commanded. Vane Tempest spun around, a .357 in his right hand. "Drop your weapon," Rick ordered, and Vane Tempest threw the gun on the ground. Rick kept his gun on the Englishman while Cynthia ran over to Archie. She pressed her index finger into his neck. "Gone." "He tried to kill me after abducting my wife," Vane Tempest said calmly. Sarah, sobbing, stood between her husband and her lover. "Have you anything to say?" Cynthia stood up, facing Sarah. "Sarah, you have the legal right to remain silent," Vane Tempest forcefully said. "This has been a dreadful situation. You take a deep breath. You're safe now." "Am I?" She put her face in her hands. "Put your hands behind your back, sir." "Rick, I killed him in self-defense. You're making a mistake." "That may be true, but for right now, the handcuffs go on." Rick snapped the steel bracelets on quickly. "Don't handcuff him. He had no choice." Sarah wiped her eyes. Archie abducted me from our home after locking H in my closet." "And why would he do that?" Rick put his gun into his holster. "Because I was having an affair with him. He wanted us to go right off into the sunset together." She didn't realize the irony of her words as the gorgeous sunset deepened. "You knew about this?" Cynthia directed this to the handcuffed Sir H. Vane Tempest. "I did, yes." "Oh, H, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never thought he'd try to kill you." She walked over to her husband and threw her arms around his neck. "I'm an old man. You're a young and beautiful woman. Maybe one of the most beautiful women on the face of the earth," he whispered. Another squad car pulled along with the Crosette Rescue Squad. Diana Robb had had a busy day. Rick motioned to his officers to go slow. Then he put his hand under Vane Tempest's elbow. "Let's go down to HQ." "May I phone my lawyer?" "When we get there." "Do I have to wear these?" "Until we get to the station, you do. Come on, before the goddamn television crew gets out here." That made the old man pick up his feet. Sarah slid into the back seat next to her husband. She never looked backward at Archie, sprawled on the ground, her snub-nosed .38 in his right hand. Chapter 57. Mim watched with her aunt as the last of the police cars drove out. "Shall we go down there?" Mim asked. "Not in the dark. Let's go in the morning." Tally watched the flickering red and blue lights. "Mimsy, stay here tonight, please." "Of course." Chapter 58. News of Archie's death spread like a prairie fire. Susan Tucker burst through the kitchen door to tell Harry, who'd already heard it via telephone from Mrs. Hagendauber, who'd heard it from Mim, who heard it from Rick Shaw. "I can't believe Archie would kidnap Sarah." Harry lay at one end of the sofa while Susan stretched out on the other end. The cats joined them, stretched across the back. Tucker curled up on the wing chair nearby. "Well, he did," Susan matter-of-factly stated. "Bull," Pewter said. "Sex does short-circuit people's brains," Tucker agreed with Susan. "But why would Archie shoot Blair?" "Her car was parked at Blair's when we found him," Mrs. Murphy said. "Well, why would she go to Blair's?" Pewter stretched her hind legs out, straight out for grooming. "Pewter, do that later. I hate that licking sound when I'm having a conversation," Harry ordered. "Priss," Pewter complained, but nonetheless tucked her hind legs underneath her. "All the girls go to Blair's," Tucker said. "Archie was at Blair's too. He didn't kidnap Sarah. Murphy said. Blair must know that. When his mind is clear and he feels better. Peter tried to think who else might know. Archie was moving out, Mrs. Murphy continued. She went there for him. Archie didn't kidnap her. He's not here to defend himself, Tucker sagely noted. Murphy laid down. A wasted life, Archie's. H is out on bail. Susan put her hands behind her head. Big surprise. Was Sarah harmed? No. She says Archie kidnapped her. He wanted to live with her. He wanted her to run away. He didn't mean to harm her. What do you think? Harry asked. I don't know what to think. I'm just glad it's over. Is it? We still don't know who killed Tommy Van Allen. Sarah confessed to Rick Shaw that Archie confessed to her that he killed Tommy over a drug deal gone sour. I don't believe it, Harry said. He did not, Murphy protested. Hush, you've had enough to eat. Sarah shot H. Vane. I don't know who killed Tommy Van Allen, but she shot H. Murphy stuck to her guns. She gets a notion, Harry commented on Murphy's conversation. And they're usually on the money, Tucker said. Thank you. Murphy rested her head on her paws. We'd better get over to Tally's place tomorrow, first light. Why so early? Peter moaned. Before people start crawling over it, the ghouls will show up whether Tally wants them to or not. Weird. Humans fear death, but they can't stay away from it, Peter remarked. Chapter 59. A line of gray illuminated the eastern horizon. Mrs. Murphy, Pewter, and Tucker were already on the ridge above Rose Hill. As they dropped down into the fertile plain, the golden rim of the sun pushed over the horizon, and the shafts of gold, like spokes on a wheel, radiated into the lighted sky. By the time they reached the barn and stone buildings, they were surprised to find Big Mim and Tally already there. A pool of blood, dark brown, stained the dirt road where Archie had fallen. Big Mim and Tally stood in silence in the circle of buildings. When Mim finally spoke, she said nothing of the evidence of murder. The women knew each other too well for Tally to be surprised. Why don't you let me restore these? I've got no use for 'em, Tally replied. You could rent them out, make a little money. After all, you were going to rent one to Archie. Mim smiled suddenly as Mrs. Murphy and Pewter came to her. Why, look who's here. Tucker lingered at the blood until Murphy sharply reprimanded her. You characters certainly cover the miles. Mim petted the cat's head. I say, let the whole damn place fall down. Tally thumped the ground with her cane. Well, that's foolish. And who are you to tell me what's foolish? I knew you in diapers. The day may come when you want to sell Rose Hill. You need to keep up the place. I can repair all this. I have a good crew. I don't know. She paused, looking skyward as the colors changed from gold to pink, to red to gold again, and the sun flooded the world with light. Crazy. She pointed with her cane to the pool of blood. Yes, it's all over now. It certainly is for Archie, damn fool. This is the South. You don't steal another man's wife without expecting retribution. That's why the rest of the country thinks we're uncivilized. We erupt. Underneath the veneer of manners, we're animals. Are you an animal, my dear? Tally raised a silver eyebrow. That's why the rest of the country thinks we're uncivilized. We erupt. Underneath the veneer of manners, we're animals. Are you an animal, my dear? Tally raised a silver eyebrow. Yes, if pushed hard enough, I am. Why kid myself? The question is, what pushes people? Love? Money? Prestige? Property? I don't know. What people kill and die for seems to be gruel to me. You're old, you forget. Tally whirled on Mim, her cane over her head. Damn you. Passion, Aunt Tally. You see? You still have it. Tally brought her cane down, then laughed. You're clever. Sometimes I forget how clever you are. Back to business. Mim deflected the compliment. Oh, what? came the irritated response. "First order of business, let me get my men in here and clean this barn. I'll bring this place back to the way it was when I was a child. How I loved to play back here. And the barn dances. Mother would wear gingham dresses and Daddy would laugh and laugh. What days those were before. Well, before everything changed, so." Change is a part of life. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. Most times it's both. A change can be bad for me, but good for the man down the road. "Maybe I can get them to look at this suitcase." Tucker wagged her tailless bottom as Mim winked at her. "You can try." Pewter shrugged. Tucker bounded into the thicket, barking like a maniac. "What's she got in there?" Mim wondered. "Tractor graveyard. Rats, maybe mice." The two women returned to arguing about the stone houses, but Tucker continued to bark. "I'll go see. Maybe she's hurt." Mim pushed through the budding bushes, which included nasty thorns. She heard the little dog under the Chevy. Raised in the country, Mim was hesitant to squat down and find herself face to face with a snarling fox or other burrowing creature, but Tucker's entreaties overcame her natural caution. She knelt down, noticing dirt fly up as Tucker dug furiously in the loom. "Look!" Tucker tugged at the corner of the suitcase. Mim reached in and grabbed the corner sticking out. She edged it toward her, grabbing the handle. As soon as Mim had the suitcase, Tucker shut up. "This is what you want?" Mim stared into the beautiful round eyes. "Open it." Mim clicked open the top. "Oh, God!" She gasped, stepping back. "What are you doing in there?" Tucker dug out an old suitcase with a tiny skeleton in it and what's left of a lace head cap and dress. She closed the suitcase, fighting her way back through the foliage. Tucker at her heels. "I don't want to see it." A ghastly pallor covered Tally's face. "Put it back, Marilyn." "I can't do that. I have to turn the skeleton over to Rick Shaw. This child was murdered. Why else would he or she be stuffed in the suitcase?" Mim noticed Tally clutch at her chest and falter. "Aunt Tally." She dropped the suitcase, the skeleton tumbling out, and grabbed her aunt. "Oh, no." Tally saw the child's bones. Mrs. Murphy and Peters watched silently. Tucker sat by the skeleton. "Put it back," Tally sobbed. Mim sank to her knees with the old lady. "No fool," she said. "What do you know about this child?" "It's mine." Tally sobbed so hard Mrs. Murphy thought her old heart would break. "Is this why Uncle Jamie shot Biddy Miner?" "Yes, I wanted to die. I loved Biddy Miner. I loved him like no man on earth, and he loved me." Mim put her arms around her aunt and softly asked, "Did you kill your baby?" No, I could never do that." "Did Biddy?" "No." "Who then?" "Daddy. He took the baby from my arms and he smothered her." Mim shivered. "I'm so sorry." I didn't show much. I got away with being pregnant. Mama suspected, but I lied through my teeth." "And what did Biddy do?" "Daddy said if Biddy set foot on this property, he'd kill him. A married man trifling with a young thing. That's what he called me, a young thing. But oh, I loved Biddy Miner, and I found a way to get a message to him. Veenie, do you remember our maid? She was born in slavery, and she was old. Veenie told him I delivered the baby and Daddy killed her. I wanted that baby. She was all I would ever have of Biddy. He couldn't divorce, you see. Nobody could back then." "Yes, I remember." "And Daddy wanted me to marry well. If anyone knew I'd had an illegitimate child, he couldn't have married me off to the milkman." "I see." Mim stood up and brushed off her knees. She helped Tally up. Tally, once on her feet, walked over to the skeleton with hesitant steps. She knelt down. Tucker whimpered. Tally looked at Tucker. She was the most beautiful little girl, with red curls just like mine when I was little. She touched the hand, and I'll never forget when she was wrapped when she wrapped her tiny fingers around my finger. She was my living memory of Biddy. Tally put her head in her hands and sobbed, racking sobs. Mim, eyes wet too, knelt down and gathered up the bones, putting them back in the suitcase. I thought Daddy buried her, but one night he got drunk and he said he put her in a suitcase and threw her in with the junk. I thought about looking for her, but I couldn't, you know? Mimsy, I just couldn't. You were a girl and you had no control over your life. How is it that Jamie shot Biddy? When Biddy heard what Daddy did to the baby, he came up here to kill him. I told Jamie I trusted him, and he loved me, I thought. Wild as he was, you could just trust Jamie. But as soon as Biddy put one foot on our land, Jamie killed him because he knew Biddy would kill Daddy for what he'd done. And I think in Jamie's heart, he thought he was protecting me. He knew I'd run after Biddy again and ruin all our lives. I never hated Jamie for what he did, but I hated Daddy. I hated Daddy for the rest of his life, and I hate him still. She touched a piece of pink ribbon on the bonnet and pleaded, "Don't give her to the sheriff." "I won't. We'll bury her on the hill with the rest of the family. She's one of us. You can tell or not tell." Mim closed the suitcase as though it carried the most precious items in the world. Then she helped up Tally and they both walked slowly back to Mim's Bentley. Tucker walked over to the girls. "Poor Tally." "It's like a Tom killing kittens," Pewter said. Bet old man Urquhart went to his grave believing he did the right thing. Tucker watched as Mim opened the door for her aunt, setting the suitcase on her lap. Humans can justify anything. Kill one, kill millions. They'll come up with a reason why it's all right. Pewter had the last word. Chapter 60. On a glorious afternoon the following week, Sarah Vane Tempest was directing her gardeners. H. Vane Tempest, in a cashmere and linen turtleneck, worked in his secondary office, used only in good weather, a 20 by 20 glassed-in porch with French doors across the entire breadth. He could open all the doors on an especially good day. He had little sense of the ordinary work week. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and expected his help to be there. For this demanding schedule, he paid quite well. Seated across from him, Howard Fenton organized blue-covered legal packets, 12 of them. His assistant, a young man fresh out of Yale Law, carefully double-checked each document. Vane Tempest, using a fountain pen, the only appropriate writing utensil, signed the last one. Behind him stood his two secretaries, whose function today was to witness the documents and affix their signatures to the bottoms. Howard viewed the two men. Vane Tempest would employ only male secretaries, multilingual at that. Does the subject appear to be in full possession of his mental faculties? Yes, they answered in chorus. Does he appear to sign this document freely and without coercion? Yes. Vane Tempest raised an eyebrow. Would you like my blood type? Howard, humorless, replied, Not necessarily, sir. Next, Vane Tempest held out of his hand his ultra-thin watch, half hidden by his cuff. The Yale Law graduate handed him another legal-sized document. This one had beige covers to distinguish it from the others. Vane Tempest read quickly. He understood the law quite well for a civilian. Then, too, those many decades of business, real estate, and one jarring divorce he had taught him the basics. Screw them before they screw you. In this instance, he wasn't interested in besting someone. He was acting with largesse. I think you'll find it just as you dictated, sir. I know, Howard, but it's a damn fool who signs a contract without reading it, even if he did dictate it. If you're bored, his voice dipped acid, and well it should, since he kept his law firm on $1 million retainer. Walk with my beautiful wife in her golden garden. I'm not bored. I'm so glad to hear it. He read on, and 10 minutes later, signed the beige-covered documents. Again, 12 copies. The black ink, specially purchased from Italy for its richness of hue, glistened on the last page of the document. Vane Tempest blew on the page. The young assistant sneaked a glance at Sarah, the lush light outlining her breathtaking features. This is what money buys, he thought to himself. Shall I hand deliver the Teotan papers to Mr. Bainbridge? Yes, Mr. Bainbridge, as you know, is in hospital. Don't tire him. Despite his injuries, I do believe this will revive his spirits. Hope so, Howard. Nasty business. The police will never find the criminal. They never do, you know. You Americans display a curious disregard for punishment and deterrence. Sir? Howard stood as his client got to his feet. If you catch them, you let them off on parole. If they're in jail, they work out with weights or watch TV. Devil's Island. By God, send them to Devil's Island. You'll see your crime statistics plunge. I agree. And he did. Off with you then. Vane Tempest smiled genially as Secretary Number 1 showed the two lawyers the front door. He clasped his hands behind his back. Butterflies covered his Italian lilacs. Late bloomers, but everything was late this year. He strode outside, feeling better than he had in a while. Putting his arm around Sarah's shoulders, he guided her to the expanse of a manicured lawn, the croquet pitch facing the north, the direct western view, the best mountain views. He wisely left unmolstered, the lawn merging with the edge of the hayfield. Spring, finally, unequivocally, yes. I have resigned my interest and by extension your interest in Teotan, Vane Tempest informed his wife. What? Dismay read all over her face. He held up his hand. Patience, hear me out. I have turned over the corporation to Blair, to which he has agreed. He has only to sign the documents I have prepared at Teotan, and Teotan is his, with my investment. I apologize for taking out my jealousy on him and speaking harshly to him. He apologized for an immoral escapade. Exact words. What about me? I thought we could go into business together, the two of us. What would you like? Turning to view her garden, she replied with a hint of determination and excitement. A nursery, a wholesale business to supply the landscape architects. How interesting. I thought you might pick a dress shop or a theater. A nursery. It's healthier. She beamed at him. So it is. H, why are you relinquishing Teotan? There are other ways to buy off Blair Bainbridge. The fellow doesn't have to be bought off. He doesn't remember much about that afternoon. Not uncommon with head injuries, I'm told. So let's just call it insurance. In case he does remember on some distant day. Besides, I think it imprudent for us to be in business with your former lover. I thought I was very clever in keeping Blair and Tommy close to me. They never suspected, I know, and I had ample time to study them. Archie, however, was a complete and dismal surprise. He didn't admit that he figured out about Blair from hearing her answer Archie's accusation during their tryst in Archie's office. He knew from the tone of her voice. Not missing a beat, she said, I hated you, H. You dismissed me. How did you keep all those balls in the air? Forgive the pun. He heard what she said, but changed the subject. I've always been good at scheduling. She stifled a laugh. Did you love any of them? No. Blair's a sweet fellow, but too languid, ultimately. And that was the briefest of affairs, H. 2 weeks. Tommy Van Allen? A flame out. It was fading before he died. She bit her lower lip, turning to face her husband. I hated you and I wanted to hurt you. Don't change the subject. I wanted to hurt you, Henry. You hurt me. H. Vane Tempest could withstand news, no matter how bad, as long as he was the center of it. You succeeded. I'm desperately sorry. No, you're not. But you will behave and we will create a successful nursery. And I suggest you give Mrs. Wu a great deal of business for all the trouble you've caused her. As Sarah remained silent, he continued, The reason you'll behave, Sarah, is that I changed my will just now. If my death is in any way suspicious, you inherit nothing. Nothing, do you understand? I understand that you will live a long and healthy life. She kissed him on the cheek. You had pluck trying to kill me. I underestimated you, undervalued you. That won't happen again. You killed Tommy Van Allen, didn't you? He shrugged. I doubt Rick Shaw would solve that crime. Henry, I know you. Tommy Van Allen was an impulsive fool. He had enough cocaine in his bloodstream to kill 3 people. The rest was window dressing. He neglected to mention that he had shot the cocaine into Tommy's veins. Cocaine was ridiculously easy to get into this wealthy country. She stuck her thumb in the waistband of her wraparound skirt. Teotan is, I should think, a generous recompense to Blair. She paused. Do you think the county will buy the well water? I do. I think Blair will become a wealthy man. Not serious money, but some money. Sarah laughed, because in her husband's world, less than $10 million qualified as some money. He kissed her lightly on the mouth. I'm going to lose 40 pounds. I've let myself go. He kept to himself the daily shots of testosterone he would be taking. Some things were best left unsaid. As for putting Tommy's bomber jacket in Herb Jones's truck and the handcuffs in Archie's van, no one had even found those. More's the pity. He did that for the sheer devilment of it. It was exciting to watch everyone come unglued. The presence of Sarah's black Jaguar at Blair Bainbridge's still bothered the police, but Vane Tempest had crawled to the top of the heap by understanding people in a cynical fashion. If the police had a solution that the public accepted, then what was one odd piece that didn't fit into the puzzle? They could prove nothing against Sarah or him. He knew Sarah had been in the plane with Tommy. He had gotten up in the middle of the night, called Tommy to meet him at the food plant under the pretext of a Teotan emergency, shot him, and loaded him with the cocaine. It took all of 15 minutes. He was home in bed by 3 o'clock, with no one the wiser. Planting cocaine in a locker storage ticket in Tommy's car was child's play. Faking a set of accounting books was easy, too. He'd run numbers off his computer, then put them into a leather binder. As for himself, he didn't fear Sarah. This episode, as he chose to consider it, only whetted his appetite for her. He saw her now for what she was, a tiger, and so was he. Chapter 61. Harry and Miranda sat on 2 chairs next to Blair's bed. Each woman had visited him 2 or 3 times a day since his shooting. Is any memory coming back at all? Miranda politely inquired. No, he truthfully replied. But the doctor said bits and pieces may come back to me. Then again, I may never remember. The last thing I remember, and it's so stupid, is I heard a car come up the driveway. I opened the back screen door and I tripped. Just took a misstep. That's all I can remember. You must be tired of everyone asking you. Harry smiled. You look good. I feel pretty good. The swelling is down. Doc wants me to wait a few more days to be certain. I'll tell you what's driving me crazy. He pointed to the bandages on his head. My scalp itches like poison ivy. I can't scratch it. Means it's healing. Miranda patted his hand. You'll be back to good health in no time. Thank you, Jesus. She closed her eyes in fervent prayer. Yes, I have been very lucky. Blair's eyes misted. Thank God for you, Harry. You've thanked me enough already. Harry warmly smiled. And Mrs. Murphy, Pewter, and Tucker. Blair smiled broadly. Yes. Harry hadn't told him or anyone the full extent of their efforts, but she knew no one would believe her. Maybe it's better not to remember. You and Archie had been friends. Miranda assumed Blair's attacker had been Archie. I just don't know, Miranda. I don't know if it's better to know or not to know, and there's not much I can do about it. I'm just so grateful to be alive. He stopped as his eyes filled with tears, and Harry and Miranda's eyes filled also. Chapter 62. Miranda's hand flew to her face. I hate to hear about drug deals. I so liked Tommy. Cynthia, in regulation sunglasses, continued her story. He must have brought the stuff in by private plane after picking it up in Florida from local airports closer by. You know those training runs that Tommy used to do? They weren't training runs. Good job. Miranda congratulated her. We've got the records. That's the real break. We found cocaine and a locker ticket from the bus station in Tommy's Porsche. So we went over to the bus station, of course, opened the locker, and that's where the accounting books were. How about that? Tucker watched people drive by the post office. Spring worked its magic on everyone. People were smiling. It galled Cynthia that Blair could not remember who shot him. The bullet had never been found, the sign of a careful killer. She knew the other shoe hadn't dropped, and she suspected H. Vane Tempest. Whatever her suspicions might be, suspicions weren't facts, and Blair's doctors confirmed he could have lost the hours leading up to his being shot. She sighed. How's Blair today? His color's better. Mrs. Hagendover offered a biscuit to Cynthia after shooing Pewter off the table. Too late, though, for Pewter had yet another fresh biscuit firmly clamped in her jaws. She chewed some of it, then tore the remainder with her claws. That's what I'm going to do to that blue jay. Dream on. Murphy listened, unmoved to the details. Doubting Thomas, cooed Pewter, who at the moment felt glorious since she had successfully stolen a biscuit. We're lucky. Murphy hopped off the counter and rubbed against the corgi's snow-white crest. She dearly loved the dog, although she wouldn't say it out loud. We saved Blair. Tucker licked Murphy's ear. Yes, she rubbed her cheek against Tucker's cheek. Big Mim, Little Mim, Herb, and Tally came in. Cynthia didn't tell them the news about finding the drug records because Big Mim already knew. If Rickshaw didn't call her the second he knew something, she'd make his life miserable. It helped that she made major contributions to various law enforcement events and charities. We're all feeling better, thanks to you. Mim shook Cynthia's hand. I don't deserve any credit, really. You're too modest. All those hours of questioning people, investigating sites, poring over evidence. No one sees how much work there is. Mim smiled. Tally spoke up abruptly. This Saturday at 3 at my place, the old cemetery. You're invited to a funeral. Oh no! Who was... Miranda rushed to console Tally, who held her hand up for silence. I'll explain at the funeral. Reverend Herb will conduct the service, and afterward I will serve refreshments with the help of my niece and tell you who died and why. I won't live much longer myself. I need to tell you. She paused, reaching for the counter to steady herself. I need to tell you how things stay with you. The past, I mean. The past lives right through us. Even if no one ever reads another history book, even if whole nations resign themselves to ignorance, the past pulls like the moon on tides. So please come. Of course we'll come. Miranda's voice, filled with warm sympathy, almost made Tally cry. I'll be there. Thank you for inviting me, Harry said. Well, how about that? Pewter was amazed. After the group left, including Cynthia, Harry and Miranda sorted, then swept the floors. I wonder why Tally invited me to this funeral, Harry asked. I believe it has something to do with you. Me? Your blood. There was talk about Tally and your great-grandfather. I was too young to pay attention, but there was talk. This was before my time. Mother remembered, though. I guess we'll find out Saturday. You know that you were ransomed from the feudal ways inherited from your fathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without a blemish or spot. She put the broom back into the broom closet. Redemption. I should think that whatever she tells us, Saturday is about redemption. What chapter and verse? 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. You amaze me. Well, in my day, we learned by rote. Stays with you. Harry scooped up Murphy and kissed her head. She was thinking about the animals driving the Porsche and knowing she couldn't tell anyone. Miranda, do you really believe that people can be redeemed? A murderer can be redeemed? Certainly I do, if he but accepts Christ as his Savior. And what about Murphy and Tucker and Pewter? Even though she's a little thief, she smiled. A thief is the only person guaranteed a place in paradise. Remember, it was a thief crucified with Christ who accepted him as the Son of God, and Jesus promised him everlasting life. Hope for Pewter. Miranda, years ago, would have been offended at the discussion, at the idea that animals have immortal souls and spiritual lives. But working with them and watching them, she had changed her mind. Not loudly, not even so much that others might notice by observation. There's redemption for Pewter. God loves all his creatures, and I believe we will be reunited in heaven. She stopped, and this, for her, was a revelation. Harry, sometimes I think that animals are closer to God than we are. Not blue jays, Pewter announced, being uninterested in theological discussions. I do too. Harry looked around. It's a wrap, partner. Miranda put her hand on Harry's shoulder. I've known you since you were born, Mary Minor, and I know you have doubts. Your faith gets shaken, but it's there. Your mother and father have rock-solid beliefs. When you need it, it's there. I hope so. In time of trouble, then Miranda stopped herself. Let's hope few troubles come our way. I think of them as tests, God's tests. Blair's being tested. He needs us. He's hurt physically and harmed morally. Little Mim will be at his side. We must all be there. She glanced at the old railroad wall clock. Oh dear, I better hustle my bustle. Harry laughed as Miranda scooted out of the post office. Her old-fashioned phrases delighted Harry. She dropped the paper shades and double-checked the lock on the sliding door that closed off the office part of the post office. Then walked to the back, dropped the hard plastic sheet in the metal slots through the animal door, and secured it with a steel pin. Lastly, she opened the back door. Come on, gang. 3 furry behinds scampered into the late afternoon as Harry locked the back door to the post office. She opened the door to the blue Ford truck, lifting Tucker in. Pewter and Mrs. Murphy had already jumped onto the bench seat. Harry turned the key. The starter clicked, then the motor turned over. She let it idle for a few minutes. No point in pushing the old girl. Once the motor hummed, she pushed down on the clutch, reaching for the long black stick shift on the floor. Mrs. Murphy moved over to sit in her lap. You want to drive? Harry asked Pewter and laughed. I only drive Porsches, Mrs. Murphy giggled. And that does it for Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent. I'm Nalani Brown, the philanthropy coordinator at Frank Toby Jones. Thanks for listening.